Hello and welcome back to another episode of Wild, Wise and Whole. Today I am joined by the amazing Tamu Thomas. Very excited for this conversation. Um, so please introduce yourself and tell the listeners a little bit about who you are.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me here, Lydia. It's a joy to be with you. My name is Tamu Thomas. I am an author, a speaker, and a coach. My first book, Women Who Work Too Much, was published in March 2024 by Hay House. And to put it succinctly, I am obsessed with the neurobiological relationship between women, power, productivity, and pleasure.
Oh,
So, my work started off with supporting women to experience more joy. I started my business. I recognized how miserable everybody was and how we want to live these lives that feel good to us, but people didn't know how to do it. And one of the things I recognized very quickly is that there were two things mainly that impacted women in terms of experiencing joy, lives that felt joyful and pleasurable. One was heterosexual romantic relationships, and the
mhm.
second was how they work, how we work. And I recognize that because I started my business as a result of burnout. I was a local authority social worker for nearly 16 years, and I kept having all of these feelings and sensations and these experiences, these illnesses, and I didn't even know what burnout was until I had a panic attack on the way to work that was debilitating. Somehow I managed to get myself together, being the overfunctioner I am, and get myself to court, give evidence. And then I went to go and see my GP. And as I started to unpack what was going on with me, I looked around and all the women in my life, regardless of whether they were friends, my relatives, women on social media, I could just see this pattern of over functioning, overworking, overgiving, over everything, and the normalization of women being depleted. And I wanted to do something about it.
Yeah, it's so interesting because mine was like similar themes when I hit burnout last year, but that feeling of just like panic. And then I still like tooted off to work and I was a child trauma therapist, so I was still like, well, I'm gonna have to go to work. And
Yep.
I just remember being in getting to work and my friend was like, I think your body is telling you that you're burnt out, you need to call the GP. And the same realization of, oh my God, I didn't grow up with anyone around me like having rest. Like it really made me face that narrative of the strong woman I'd glorified in my nana and my mom and the women around me, the utter self-sacrifice. And that was
Hmm.
like, God, honestly, the grief that brought to then look at them that way. I was like, God, they self-sacrificed their whole life and actually they were glorified as these strong women who could do everything, and I still feel it with my mum now. So yeah, there's so much of that that I
Yeah.
resonate with. It's a tough realization, that isn't it, to see all the women around you, they just give and self-abandon and they just overwork themselves to the ground.
It's a gut punch, honestly.
Yeah, it really is. How did you go from like being burnt out to taking that step to like what was your healing process through burnout?
So, and even then, it wasn't called burnout. So, as I
Mm.
said, I had my panic attack on my way to work. And then I went to go and see my GP. And my GP straight away was trying to give me anxiety medication. And when I eventually got to see a psychologist, they said that what I was describing as heightened periods of anxiety were actually panic attacks, and they explained that I was probably experiencing a moderate level of no, a severe level of moderate depression for a long time.
Wow.
Yeah. And then because I left that, my body had to up the ante. So I started to experience anxiety. And
Yeah.
because I ignored that, when you're a highly skilled overfunctioner, you can dissociate, you can suppress that, you can
Yeah.
strategize your way out of your experience. So because I left that and I found, whether it was going to boot camps first thing in the morning, jacking myself up with loads of caffeine, listening to all of these motivational podcasts and
Oh,
YouTube videos
Tamu,
and
this
stuff.
is like you're talking about me last year. And like for the past decade, this is crazy.
Literally, like that song, Pump Up the Jam, I was constantly pump, 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 whatever I can do. And so when they referred me for therapy, I'm a social worker. I understand different forms of therapy. I
Yeah.
said, I don't want CBT. I'm not struggling to get up and out. I can function on top of this. I kept saying it feels more primal. And they were looking at me like, what you talking about, Willis? I was like, it feels like a soul returning. Like, I can't explain it. But because I've got I've always had dabbled in and out of having a spiritual practice and this and that, I thought to myself, I'm going to start with the journaling.
Mm,
So the first thing I did, because I've always loved writing. As a child, I thought I would write a poetry book. I used to really love poetry. And I had an A5 sized journal that I used to carry around with me everywhere.
mm.
And I used to just write down how I was feeling, the repetitive thoughts that were coming up, the intrusive thoughts, my responses to things. And I would read back over that journal and I started to identify patterns. I started to identify a huge pattern of me saying yes without even considering whether or not I could or couldn't do that thing.
Oh wow.
So, journaling is how I started. Then I started, so this was in 2016, going into 2017. So then I started listening to podcasts. And listening to podcasts, I was being aware of new concepts. I was starting to learn about different things. And I came across a book called The Shadow Effect by Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, and Debbie Ford. Now, if you're going to go and look at that book, be mindful. It's a little bit gaslighty in places.
Mm,
And coming from the social work background, I was able to say, well, that's nonsense. I'm not taking that on board. But that book, The Shadow Effect, helped me understand how there were many elements of my personality, my character, my behavior that had become shadows, that had become things that I deemed as bad and I put away. And these are the things that I'm celebrated for. These are the things that help me make money and write books and all of this kind of stuff. But it was things like being too joyful. It was things like being what people would call bossy. I'm a natural leader. Well, am I a natural leader? Is it a result of childhood experience? I don't know. But I will always somebody like my mum will talk about me organizing games at nursery and stuff like that. So I've always been the take charge type of person. So that would be frowned upon. I'm very enthusiastic. I have ideas all the time. So, core elements of my behavior, because it rubbed up against the shadows of other people, became things that I put into my shadows. So, I started
mm,
to understand about my shadow self. I started to learn how I was either blaming myself or blaming other people for things that were going around. I could see how working in many environments and institutions that were a blame culture helped me to internalize either blaming myself or other people, again, operating from that victim consciousness. So I started to take responsibility for my behavior and start to recognize how I'm a social worker. We work with systems theory. We're always looking at how the system impacts the family system and how the
yeah.
family system impacts the individual system. So I started to look at all of those things and think, oh, well, it's not just me. These things are occurring across the board, and I'm a product of my environment. And I really liked Marianne Williamson's section of that book. So then I read her book, Return to Love, and that
Mm,
just blew me sideways. It really opened up my heart. It really opened up me to me. And that's the book where she has the quote that always goes around about the was it? We're more powerful beyond our deepest fear is that we're more powerful beyond measure.
mm,
I could see that a lot of my behaviors were about suppressing my magnetism, about how, wonderful I can be. And so I then started coaching. My friend Nicola, she was the first coach I came across that I could understand what was going on, because up until that point, coaching was always a very slim, very pretty white woman on a beach with her laptop talking about how much money she was making. I really didn't understand it. And when I watched Nicola's content on Facebook at that time, I just saw something within her that I needed. And in my first coaching session with her, I was talking about stuff, and she said, "Well, that sounds," she said, "Hear me out. That sounds like it could be a limiting belief." I was like, "Huh? What's a limiting belief?" And she explained what a limiting belief was, and I was able to recognize how most of my doubts, my insecurities, and the things that led me to overfunction to prove my worth and my value were all things I had learned from the outside. They were all things that I had learned about: this is how you get acceptance, this is how you prove yourself, this is how you're worthy. It took me back to a conversation my mum had with me when I was 12. So, in the area I lived in, you went to secondary school when you were 12 rather than 11, and she was talking to me, and this is something that lots of black people and people of color would have heard from their parents, that because I'm black, I'm going to have to work twice as hard for half the recognition of my white counterparts. So whilst my mum shared that with me to prepare me and to support me, what that left me with is that I've got to work way harder than everybody else to be seen as equal. And that really fed into that pattern of overworking. And like you've mentioned, I come from a long line of women who work too much. So not only is it something that I observed in my environment, it's intergenerational. So my epigenetics tell me it's unsafe for me not to work too much. So when I was doing my healing work, I stumbled across positive psychology, and positive psychology led me to the world of somatics, because it helped me recognize that it didn't matter how much I was thinking, I knew what to do, yet I was still going round and round in circles. And that's how I learned that there was so much stuff trapped in my body and that I was operating in high functioning freeze.
Yeah, oh my God, resonate with so much of that. And I just think it's like same doing all the things from like a mindset level. And essentially, like me and Leah always laugh about this, but like now that we look back, how much we were just like gaslighting ourselves with self-development and like reading books written by men, like for example, that 5 a.m. club, and feeling like as a woman I had to wake up at 5 a.m. in order to be successful, and no
Yep,
mention. I still say it now, I'm really passionate about it, but there's still not really a mention of the female body and the female nervous system in somatic training.
yep,
It's very, very limited. So again, we're still being taught about these somatic and body-based healing, predominantly of a male nervous system, which is so
absolutely.
different to ours. Like we need different things, and our output for productivity is so different to that of what we see with men. And only if we would have been taught that, like, imagine how many women, generations of women, wouldn't have thought that we had to be in that, like what you say, that functional freeze in
Yeah.
order to survive, because it's
Hmm.
also really hard to hold the things that, well, I personally found it's hard to then hold the things that we receive when we're in that space. So it's always like this back and forth of like calling it, losing it, because it's
Yep,
so hard to hold it because you're
yep,
in a survival response.
yep. And our whole society is constructed in that way.
Yeah.
So when I think about like the spiritual practice of manifestation, for example, we are taught so much about being the person we need to be to do the thing we need to do to have the thing we want to have. But there's not the same energy that goes into creating that nervous system agility and flexibility to be able to hold it. And I don't mean hold like from a place of fear, but be able to hold it and enjoy it and savor it and allow it to pass through us and then go where it needs to go when we have finished enjoying it. So it means that we're really good at working really hard and over functioning, but we haven't developed the skills that enable us to enjoy, which is why our successes often feel saccharine, like we're eating Haribo instead of like a sumptuous meal, because we don't know how to be satisfied. We don't know how to appreciate and really take in when enough is enough. And because of the way we are conditioned, we almost feel like if we say, I'm satisfied with this, I'm really enjoying So I'm just going to rest here a moment and savor it. Our society tells us that's lazy. That our society tells us that means we don't have drive. That means we're not ambitious. When actually what we're doing is we are savoring, we are allowing our success to be satisfying. And because we don't have that, and there are so many negative connotations that are associated with being content, we then end up just, we try to complete this thing straight away onto the next, straight away onto the
Oh,
next,
that was
straight.
me.
So we end up just like we're eating loads and loads of Haribo and getting those sugary highs, and then we're crashing down again because we're not having the variety we need for us to feel satiated and sustained.
Yeah, that's like a love language, right? Like that.
Huh,
Ugh,
right?
like for sure, when you can just be like so, and I feel that actually, I feel like an energy in my chest now because I just think how different it is to live your life like that. And I remember, the first time my dad ever mirrored back to me, or anyone has ever mirrored back to me, that like you're never happy when you achieve something. Because I'd done my masters and I was like, right, I'm gonna do a PhD, and he was like,
Yep,
Lizzie, you've only just finished your masters.
yep,
And what's really interesting is now it come up in conversation over the weekend. This is just like a small example, but someone said to me, "Are you still going to do that PhD?" And I was like, probably not, because it requires a lot of self-sacrifice. And actually, I don't even know if I really want to do it. But if I would have took action when I initially thought I wanted the PhD, I would have been doing that now. And I would have been doing something that actually deep down I probably didn't want to do. I was just in that high achieving,
yep,
onto the next, onto the next, onto the
yep,
next.
yep.
And I think we lose so much. Like I've never actually heard anyone talking about being satisfied with success because I feel like we're taught the opposite. Like I've never seen anyone talk about that on social media actually, because I think once we achieve success, like you said, what now do we need? And we want more and more and more and more.
Yeah.
But then it's
I
like
call it the
what is
more
required?
monster. It's insatiable.
Yeah. And then it's like what is required of us as women to call in, like to hold more if we're already again in this
Yeah,
survival response. It's
yeah,
the self-sacrifice. That's what
yeah,
it feels like.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because womanhood is conflated with martyrdom. And we end up living a life where it's like sometimes you watch the nature programs and there are
Yeah.
those lizards, they move so fast it looks like they're walking on water. We're
Yeah.
constantly treading water, and it can feel quite dangerous if you think about a body of water like the sea, for example. If you're constantly treading on the surface, you're crashing around, you're thrashing around because of all of the waves. But if we allow ourselves to stop, to surrender and drop down, the ocean is calm. You
Yeah.
don't see fish and sharks and whatever else being crashed around. They're swimming, they're floating, they're being held, they're being supported, and there's a huge expanse of water. But because our conditioning keeps us like right here in the top of our heads, not feeling, not recognizing our embodied experience, even sensations that feel enriching can feel dangerous. So we shut them down. And we see this in all, we talk about like shutting down feelings that feel uncomfortable and inconvenient and unhelpful, but we also do that with feelings that feel really alive and zesty and vibrant. We see that when I work with women all the time. We have all sorts of conversations, and people know with me anything goes. And it's like conversations with women who say as soon as they're about to climax, they shut it down. So they do experience orgasm, but it's a tiny fraction of what is available to them, what their bodies can handle, because their mind can't handle it. And they don't have trust that their body is actually one of the most sophisticated organisms on this planet and can handle that level of euphoric joy, and
Yeah.
can also handle feelings that feel like we're going to die and it's going to break us. Anybody who's listening right now, just take a moment. You are here despite all of the stuff you may have experienced in the past, the traumas you never thought you were gonna get through, the failures, the judgments, the shame, the anything that you could, the rejection.
Mm.
But you're still here. That tells you how potent and powerful your body is. And when we operate in this way, where we're constantly chasing the next, the next, the next, we don't have the opportunity to really feel and be with our experience. It's a bit like if you can get anything, but I'm going to say a raisin, like eat a raisin really quickly and then eat another one really slowly. you're gonna feel the texture, the different tastes, how it interacts with your the different parts of your mouth. That what we do is we deny ourselves that well-rounded experience when we're focusing on just quickly chewing, digesting, and moving on to the next.
Yeah, oh, for sure. I like one of my favorite things to do. I'm actually doing like a 28-day pleasure practice at the minute for myself, but
Ooh,
I've also like invited women in. I thought I'd get like 5 women, and I've ended up with 31 of us in the group, so that's mega.
awesome.
And the last, we're kind of leading, the intention is to awaken the yes please in our bodies. So using, eventually we're going to get to like touch and
Mm,
sensuality. But the first thing I said to them was, I want you to think about what pleasure is for you. And there was women in the group being like, oh wow, like I've never actually even reflected on that question. Like I don't know what is pleasurable. And then there was another woman who said, like, I've realized pleasure is also outside of myself. And I'm like, there's pleasure in every day. Like for me,
absolutely.
eating food with my hands is one of the most pleasurable
Hmm.
things that I can do.
Hmm.
Um, like cuddles with my cat, and I think as much as we deny, like you've said, the hard stuff that we have to go through in order to grow and evolve, we also deny ourselves pleasure, joy, intimacy, connection. And these things are just as important, if not more important, than going through all of the darkness and the heavy stuff, because
Absolutely.
we are like sensational beings, like, and when we allow ourselves to feel that, it's so deeply healing. And it also like gives us a different narrative of toxic positivity, being anxious all the time, being stressed all the time. And I say to clients all the time, like, this is not how it should be, Like, once you get to the other side, I know you've probably felt this, but it's almost like you have this veil lifted and you're like,
Yeah.
oh shit, like, it doesn't have to be that way. That's
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I concur with everything you've said. I have a workshop I used to do, which is called The Potent Power of Pleasure.
Mm,
And the first time every time I delivered it, there would be tears. And the first time I delivered it, we were talking about the difference between sensuality and sexuality and the different forms of pleasure, and pleasure being like a supreme sign of nervous system safety.
yeah,
And a woman became really tearful because she said that she didn't realize that pleasure, sensuality, and sexuality were things she could have for herself. She
yeah,
thought they were things that you had to give away. So she grew up with narratives such as your wifely duty, taking
yeah.
one from for the team, laying back and thinking of England. And one of the things that I've been working on, like chipping away at in the background, is my theory, my hypothesis is that in the same way all human beings have a gut brain axis,
Mm.
as women and people with a clitoris, we have a pleasure power axis.
Oh, 1,000%.
Women who are able to embody their pleasure are also women who are very powerful. And I
Yes.
believe that's why systems like the patriarchy spent so much time creating an environment where women felt depleted, not even just knackered, but depleted to the core. Because when you are shattered, you do not have the bandwidth to be thinking about pleasure and what pleasures you. And I'm certain that women who centuries ago were branded as witches were women who knew exactly how to pleasure themselves,
Mm.
exactly how to engage with pleasure in their environment, which led them to have the boundaries they needed to have, which meant that they were not ready and willing to give themselves away and be martyrs for the entire community. So they were branded as witches.
That's so interesting. I'm sure I've read a book as well where it was talking about like centuries ago, before I think it was religion kind of spun the narrative of, being the wife and being very pure.
Yeah,
Women who had that sexual kind of energy and aliveness were the ones who were worshipped. Like men would worship them, but
yeah,
not in a sense of like being intimate with them, just like the to be around that energy is
they were
so
goddesses.
unbelievably, yeah, that's why they were goddesses, because of
Yeah,
the energy and the aliveness.
yeah,
And I definitely think there's a big kind of piece missing. Is like I always say, this is like almost sexuality work is separated from nervous system work, but actually the two are, in my experience and my client work, the two are succinct. So when you work on
yeah,
that kind of essence of pleasure and sexuality and sensuality and embodiment, it also has a profound impact on your nervous system. And like if you've experienced any trauma, I think it has a profound uh, kind of impact on that as well. And I think as just even as we discussed this, it feels like two opposite ends of the spectrum, right? To be this woman who is highly functioning in functional freeze, to turn towards the opposite end of the spectrum, which is pleasure in your body, regulated, feeling your power, owning your power. So if someone's listening to that and they're like, well, how do I get all the way down there? Like, what would you say to them?
First of all, it's we live in the micro, so your ability to overfunction didn't happen overnight. It was
Mm,
built over time. And when we think about epigenetics, it's also been built within your DNA, like your cellular expression. So,
yeah.
first of all, you need to give yourself time. If you have been dissociated from your body for a long time,
Yeah.
there's a rupture in your relationship that needs to be repaired. Self trust is probably very, very low because your body, your energetic system, your nervous systems are used to you neglecting yourself. So there's no trust there. And if you think about your body being a version of yourself when you were a child, if you think about a child that you promise you're going to take them to the park, and then when it comes down to it you never take them to the park, when you say to them you're going to take them to the park, they're going to be very suspicious because the evidence doesn't align with what you're saying. So you need to start keeping small promises to yourself so that you can build that trust. So on a very kind of foundational level, it would be starting your day with intention. So when you wake up in the morning, before you do anything, before you get out of bed, before you pick up your phone, before you start thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, I've got to do the other, check in with your breath.
Mm,
We don't need to do any breath work. Your body is very capable of breathing. It does it all the time. And sometimes when we're doing breath work and all of these kind of things, it's a means of controlling ourselves.
mm.
Allow your breath to breathe through you.
But that's breath work, right? Like again, it's redefining the I say this to
Indeed.
people all the time, it's redefining the concept of what breath work is.
Yeah.
So many stressed human beings don't breathe into their bodies. So I say pausing, taking a full deep breath into your body, that's breath work. Like
Yeah.
sometimes we make everything really fancy and think we need
Yeah.
this big 10-minute practice, but like you
Yeah.
said,
Does it need to
take a
be?
breath into your body, like
And I'd
that's
even go further. We don't need to work it. Like our
no.
body breathes. Do you know
Yeah,
what I'm
it
saying? Like
does.
we,
Just
we don't need to
deeper
just
breath.
just just breathe. However, whatever feels nourishing to you in that moment, breathe in that way. And
Mm,
then lay your hand on your heart. Connect with your heart. Lots of people will say, I don't have a relationship with my body. I don't know how I feel.
mm.
Lay your hand on your chest. You are going to feel your hand on your chest.
Yeah.
That's embodiment, baby. Like,
Yeah.
as you said, all of these really complex things we do, let me tell you something. You have a body, you are embodied. You
Yeah.
move your body, you are doing somatic movement. The
Yeah.
soma is the vibrant living body. But you start the morning checking in with yourself. Before your mindset runs off to, I've got to smash the day, I've got this, I've got that. Just take a few breaths, connect with yourself, and ask yourself, what do I need today?
Mm.
And be prepared. You might not hear anything back because your body's like, you cannot be talking to me because you haven't been speaking to me all this time.
Yeah.
So allow that to build. That practice will start to build the trust and allow it to be what it is. It could be, I need to make sure I drink enough water. I've been dehydrated for 3 years.
Yeah.
It could be, to be quite frank, I'm working from home today. I need a wank and a bubble bath halfway through the day because that's going to
Yeah.
help me out, right? It
Yeah.
can be any of the it could be today, when you're asked this thing in the meeting that you're going to be asked, you need to be able to say no. So we need to think about what you need to do to cultivate a state of being able to say no. It could even be you need to cultivate a state of being able to say a full bodied yes. So you check in with yourself first thing in the morning. I would say to people, do that for a month. Don't do
Yeah.
anything more. Just do that for a month because we have a tendency to try and strategize and toxic productivity our way into alignment, into embodiment,
And that is
into
like, Tamu, you're speaking my language because I'm just
take your
like, we can't,
time.
there's no, and clients will come to me and be like, okay, what are we going to do? And I'm like, No, we're
Yeah,
going to follow the thread of the body. And
yeah,
unfortunately, that is going to require just dropping into the experience. And even that for people is so like, people are like, okay, what we're gonna do? And I'm like, no,
What do I
no.
get? What's the result? What does it mean? What's the
Yes.
process? What's the formula?
Yeah. And I think as well is like even that little practice that people can do is so important because I always say to people like slowly, slowly and simplify it. Like there's so much noise, which is great in like the somatic space because it's a conversation, but like clients will say to me, okay, so like why don't I don't I still feel dysregulated. And I'm like, babes, it's been like for a week, you know, like you've been chronically dysregulated for over a decade. Like just slow. It's not about hard and fast. Just slow it right down. Because
Yeah.
when you do
Romance
that,
it.
like it's simplicity and slowness is like your body one day is going to be like, oh my God, like there's so much trust. You've kept showing up for me. The same as like you've said, you know, you would if baby you or in you if you're in a relationship.
Exactly.
And also know that like even by let's say you do that practice for a week and you're still not hearing anything, it's like it's okay. But all of those things that arise for you is like to reach the point of pleasure or to reach the point of having a relationship with your body is that you have to also work through those things that arise. So frustration, kind of the void that you might be in, the sadness that you realize you don't feel anything, like all of these things are so important to kind of hold and
Absolutely.
honor.
Yeah.
And then I think the other thing as well with that practice is like even if you don't step into, let's say, vocalizing that no in work, you then get to be able to feel into how does that actually feel in my body when I go against myself? Because you're so used to being in this like
Yeah.
fight or flight sympathetic like freeze.
Yeah.
You probably self-abandon a lot of times, but you're not aware enough to notice it. So I always say to
Because we're
people, what
rewarded for it.
yes, we're rewarded for it, of course. So we don't notice that. So it's like once you start to notice that, how it feels to self-abandon, that in itself is enough to start to create some level of change because that's
Yeah.
fucking uncomfortable to notice that.
You will give yourself the ick when you know. Honestly, when you know, when you know, and I know you're laughing because you know exactly what I mean. When you understand, I didn't know what resentment felt like in my body
Mm,
until I started to think and feel before saying yes. And I describe it like an elevator going down really quickly, like a gadung feeling
yeah.
inside myself. And I was like, oh my goodness, I feel this a lot of the time. And it meant that unless it felt like unless I really needed to do it for whatever reason,
Mm,
unless it felt like a full bodied, vibrant yes, I had to say no. And I was saying no way more than I was saying yes. And that helped me realize. And on the occasion that I went against myself and I said yes, I would get the ick. I
yeah.
would literally give myself the ick. And it feels so repulsive. You
Mm,
know, when you come to the end of a relationship with somebody and you're like, I need to end this really quick because you are actually making me feel repulsed, and any respect I had is going out of the window.
yeah.
We do that with ourselves because it's a really big dishonoring. And I say to people, think about an occasion where you've been with somebody and they're not telling the truth and you know it and you're like, are you really standing here
Mm,
telling me a lie? Or somebody said something and at the time it didn't quite make sense. And then you're in the freezer aisle in Sainsbury's. You're like, hold on a minute. That
yeah.
doesn't make no sense. That's a lie.
Mm,
That feeling is what's going on below the level of consciousness when we abandon ourselves. We've just become very good at suppressing that, but it's still going on. Our body still feels it, our nervous system still feels it. So it's about we have to take radical responsibility. And when we feel that ick, when we feel I can't abandon myself in that way, we have to remember that we are sovereign. We make choices for ourselves, and sometimes people aren't going to like it. It's not that that it might come across as they don't like us, but what's happened is our relationship was built on certain building blocks, and
mm,
we're now moving them building blocks so that the relationship's taking a different shape. And that person doesn't like it because what they're used to has changed. So when
yes.
we are having new boundaries, when we are saying no, etc., it's not that we owe people an explanation, but the people we have close relationships with, the people that we're in close proximity to, we do need to say to them, actually, that used to be okay with me, but it's no longer okay. So I'm making different choices. We're not seeking permission. We're not asking them to validate us, but we're informing them about what's going on. And the reason I say that is one of my longest friendships had to come to an end because, quite frankly, we weren't support. I don't want to go too much into it, so I'm
Mm,
stepping around trying to find a way to explain it. We were no longer in alignment. That's what I would
yeah.
say. We were no
Mm,
longer in alignment. And I kept trying to shapeshift and change myself so that I could find a way to be in that relationship. But I had to come to the place where I understood that relationship was no longer safe for me as a human being
mm,
because my evolution and me being who I was causing offense to that person, and it reacted in them lashing out in particular ways. So, when I first was trying to salvage the relationship and see what was possible for us, the person said to me, "Ah, okay, cool." And this is, I really had to take this bit. She said, "You've changed the rules and you didn't tell me, so I didn't know the game we were playing."
oh,
So when she said that, I was like, oh, that is really profound. Actually, I didn't say to you, this is what I need now. These are the changes that have occurred within my life. So I no longer subscribe to this and that. And then when we did have that conversation, the person still wasn't able to come on board.
mm,
And that let me know I've tried. I've tried to create a new parameter for our relationship, and it's still not working. So now, and it was painful. This is
yeah.
a very long friendship. Families, no families, wider friendship group was impacted as well. But I recognized that I couldn't be me in the relationship because the relationship was too small. I was trying to expand it, and the person didn't want to expand. They wanted things to stay the same. So I had to make a choice for myself. There's no point me doing all of this growth work to pretend I'm not growing. And I had to make a choice to walk away from that relationship.
Yeah, and that's hard, right? And I just think as well, like this journey to change our narratives and who we are as women and change, the generational cycles and who we've been, the molds that we fit into is like is it brings so many amazing things, but my God, it also brings like so many like griefs
Pain,
and pain and like
grief.
grief, like even small things that are so like ridiculous, but when before I hit burnout and done this work, like I would drink, let's say 2, 3 cups of coffee a day, which means I could happily on a lovely afternoon now, 2 p.m., walk to a coffee shop, get my laptop, get a coffee. And then when kind of I done the work on my nervous system, one coffee enough, at a push two, but one coffee is like enough for me now in the morning. So I then had my one coffee and I'm like, oh, kind of feels like it's took away that little thing that I would do. And my friend was like, well, you can go and get a herbal tea. And I'm like, yeah, but it's just not the same. And it feels almost like there was like a sadness to that of, oh, I've lost that thing that I really
Yeah,
enjoyed, or having a
yeah,
monster and putting some rap music on and going to the gym. Like I love that. And now
yeah,
I don't drink those drinks. And I always say to people, like, there's mini griefs along the way.
yes,
For sure, and then there's like big, profound, griefs and pain, like
yeah,
breakdown of relationship, and in those moments, it is hard to keep choosing yourself,
very.
but it's so worth it because the pain, and I always say to people, the suffering that you experience when you're chronically dysregulated, suppressing trauma, not speaking your truth, in unhealthy dynamics, that pain that you live with every day, I don't think you realize the extent of it until you do this and you start to come out the other side of it and you look back and you think, how the fuck did I live like that
Yeah,
every single day, not
yeah,
speaking my truth, stressed to death, jacked up on caffeine. So yeah, I really resonate with that, and I think for sure it's not an easy process, but it's definitely
it's
worth
not.
it.
It's not. And I think there's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book called The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Francis Weller.
Mm,
And it's a book about grief. And he talks about grief on a spiritual level. And I highly recommend everybody get that book because it helps you understand what we experience when we're grieving. And one of my like catchphrases is shit is fertilizer. So we need to allow ourselves to experience that grief, to metabolize that grief. Because when we metabolize that grief, we can process it and then we can let go what we don't need. And it doesn't disappear off into nowhere. It it turns into rot, it decomposes, and then we're left with very rich fertilizer.
Yeah.
And that supports and strengthens our experience. So I'm not one of these people that was like, your trauma makes you stronger, because my goodness, when we're experiencing it, it is hellish. It can
It's
be
horrific.
really debilitating and have such a profound impact. And when you can then look at, okay, well, how did I grow from this? How has this enriched me, so that we're moving away from post traumatic stress disorder to post traumatic growth? You will then start to see that actually this beautiful piece of kit we live in
Mm.
is built to be able to navigate all of those experiences. And like strength training, like I love a bit of strength training, in order for our muscles to get stronger and us to build our strength and our capacity, we get delayed onset muscle soreness, DOMS, because our muscles shred. When people talk about shredding, like your muscles do tear, and those tears allow bigger growth. So it's about recognizing that these things we go through, if we stop squashing them down and ignoring them, and we actually allow ourselves to be with and experience them by working with practitioners like you or me or other practitioners, they then become experiences that enable us to become resourced. I don't believe in uh, our society's obsession with resilience. I don't
Mm.
think that resilience is something to aim for. Resilience is a coping strategy.
Yeah.
Resilience is survival. If you imagine resilience, it is bouncing back from adversity. We don't want to create environments where we're constantly bouncing back from adversity. We should do that for a finite period of time. It's about when we bounce back from that adversity, we take what we've learned and we resource ourselves,
Mm.
so we're more resourced, we're more resourceful. I think that's what we should be aiming for. Having the skill of resilience is wonderful, but that is about survival. Where we go from that resilience is making changes so that we're not constantly bouncing back, we actually expand our resources.
I think that's like so profound for anyone just even like being able to listen to that because again, yeah, resilience is glorified and I actually spoke to my mom about this recently and she, she's holding a lot of things. She's like the definition of overfunctioning and highly overstressed and she was like, I'm resilient and I said to her like, Mom, resilience and avoidance are not like they're not the same thing. Um and choosing to just keep going is not actually resilience. And she was like, well, yeah. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting how that's like the narrative spun on women is like it links back to this over functioning, being in this functional freeze, being resilient, being able to handle everything. But actually, like, you don't want to be able to handle everything because that's not good. That's not good
It's
for
not.
nothing to ever affect you. And like, I know you've probably felt this being in social work, but when I used to work in the criminal justice system, nothing ever used to affect me. And people used to say to me all the time, like, oh, you're not affected by the work that you do. And I'd be like, no,
You're so strong.
you're so strong. And I realized it's because, like, I was so disconnected from myself. So I think all of these things really make you aware of, like, how much we are operating in what you call, functional freeze. And what are some, like, little things people can look out for if they do think if they're resonating with what we're saying, they do think they're in that functional freeze, they do think they're, like, anxiety as a result of all of this stuff or their struggles what we're talking about.
I want to say, I want you to consider what's important,
Yeah.
because a lot of this comes from we believe we have to be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
And then we also brought up with this narrative about we can have it all. That's a lie. That's actually marketing spin that was developed in the early 80s when there was an economic downturn and they needed more middle class women to get into the workplace and more women to work full time. And women were really concerned about how they would be able to manage their home life and their work life. And that's when the narrative, you can have it all, was developed.
That's
So
interesting.
then women entered the workplace in droves with this narrative that they could have it all, but none of the infrastructure, none of the support was put in place for them to have it all. So it actually ended up with women doing it all. So what I want you to start to think about is what is important to you. So when I first came into the coaching industry, I was fully on board with the you can have it all narrative and everything. When I first came in, it was all about six figures, then it was about
Mm.
seven figures. Now people are talking about eight figures. And I could just see there were cycles of burnout, people burning down their businesses and starting all over again or crashing out totally. And I had to think to myself, well, what's important? And I wrote it down, all the things that are important for me to experience and feel in my life and to be able to provide for my daughter and myself. And I calculated how much that would cost. I was on. We live in a lovely flat, but I want to buy a bungalow. I really would love us to live in a bungalow. So I went on and I did some research. I found out the prices for these things. What would the mortgage repayments be? What would the council tax, utilities? I want to save this amount a month. I want to invest this amount. I want my daughter to have this. I calculated all of that. And I don't need to have a seven-figure business in order for me to live that lifestyle.
Nice.
As far as I'm concerned, we work to support how we live. A lot
Yeah.
of us have been conditioned to work, I mean, to live to support how we want to work. But for me, work is part of my self care. Work is part of how I take care of myself. So if work is part of my self care and I know exactly how much I need to earn to be able to create a great quality of life where I've got time to be content and my success is satisfying and I'm role modeling what I want to role model to my daughter, and I've actually got time to enjoy the fruits of my labor, if that is what I want, I don't need to be doing all of these jiggery pokery funnels and this, that, and the other to be able to create that. There's a different way. So, what I would say to everybody is get clear on what's important. And when you get clear on what's important, you'll start to recognize how a lot of what you thought was important and a lot of what you thought made success is actually other people's ideas of success, not your
Oh,
own.
100%. That was me with like 10K months when I was like first in the coaching industry. And then
Yeah,
I kind of had a reflection like, "Well, do I even want that?" And when I journaled on it, I was like, I don't even want that. This
yeah.
was a couple of years ago, which is super interesting. And me and Leah have just said then, it's like, would you could have a seven-figure business, but if you're self-sacrificing and you're burning out as a result of that, is like, is it really worth it? Or would you rather have less money but more time, feel content, be growing, be sustainable? Like, for sure, now I'd say the latter, but I think a lot of people would be like, well,
Give me the money.
I'll take the seven-figure business
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure,
yeah,
and
yeah.
self-sacrifice along the way to get there. I've absolutely loved this conversation, and yeah, I could just continue to talk to you all day because, like, just your perspective and your knowledge on things is amazing. Um, and I know you have like a brand and the Live 360.
Hmm.
Yes, tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about that.
So my company name is Live 360 because when I began my journey, I recognized that I was just sitting on the periphery of my life and that I was only prepared to look at the 180 degrees that looked nice and bright and shiny, impress people. And I realized that if I was to stand in the middle of my 360 degrees, I would be able to see myself in my entirety and recognize that there was no one part that took away from the other. It all contributed to create that 180 degrees of shiny wonderfulness. So I wanted to work with people to live in the center of their lives and take in that full 360 degrees and recognize that every part of themselves comes together to create the magnificent human being they are.
That's amazing. And what does it mean for you to be wild, wise, and whole?
It means for me to be myself. Like it's as simple as that,
Yeah.
not who people want me to be, and being myself. People think authenticity is being the same way every single day.
No.
No, authenticity depends on where I am in my cycle, where I am on the autonomic ladder.
Mm.
It depends on the environment I'm in, but whatever it is making sure that I am being in alignment with who I am at that moment.
Thank you so much. I've loved
Thank
this
you.
chat.
Thank you.
Where can people find you and how could they work with you?
The best place to find me is on Instagram, that I refer to as my playground, and I am there as Tamu.Thomas, so Tamu.Thomas, Thomas. And if you would like to dip your toe in and find out about being resourced and awakening the sensual, vibrant body that you are, I have a membership community called The Sovereign Woman, and
Nice.
that is my focus for this year. There are other ways to work with me, but the main way I would like to reach people and work with them is by joining my membership community. Or if you're like, no, I don't want all of that, I just want to do some stuff in my own time, my book, Women Who Work Too
Yeah.
Much, is available everywhere. And if you're an audio girly, I highly recommend the audiobook because it's like being coached by me.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
I'll give that a listen on Spotify,
yeah,
actually.
yeah,
Oh, great. Thank
yeah.
you so much. This has
You're
been
very
an
welcome.
amazing chat and I've loved it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.